Hello everyone, I'm Tarana Kaushik from ETHRWorld. We welcome you all to the ETHRWorld and Edcast Virtual Roundtable discussion today on Nex-Gen learning for exponential times. In today's unprecedented times where disruptions are an everyday thing, agility is a key transformation lever. The speed and scale at which organizations are able to upskill and reskill their workforce will determine how quickly are they able to adapt and adjust to this new order of work.
An illustrious panel of speakers, some of the most prominent names in the world of HR and business. This panel will shed light on what's changing in the landscape of learning and development and what are the strategic changes that are essential for every business to survive and succeed in the new age work world, where learning is the new working. I'm so glad to introduce to you to our esteemed panelists for this roundtable today. Avinash Mishra is the CEO, NSE Academy. He considers himself a lifelong learner who believes that experience is the best teacher. Guy Witcher is the Global Head Learning for Standard Chartered Bank. He is joining us from Singapore today. His background has been in corporate banking. The motivation for him in learning is helping people develop and grow and creating tangible impact on organizational performance. Vinay Razdan, who is the CHRO for HDFC Bank. He's an alumni of XLRI, and if he had not been in HR profession, he would have loved to be a master chef. Dr. Prince Augustine, who is the Executive Vice President, Group Capital and Leadership Development at Mahindra & Mahindra. Vishpala Reddy, she's ex-APAC Regional HR Director for Uber. She'll soon be joining Philips as Head of Human Resources, Indian Subcontinent. She's mother of two energetic boys and she enjoys gardening as well as keeping herself fit. Nishchay Suri, who's the President, Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa, EdCast. Nishchay is a teacher at heart and that is his inspiration that drives him to invest his time in learning every day and participating in conferences so that he can share. He'll be moderating our session today. Over to you, Nishchay.
Thank you, Tarana. The Wall Street Journal carried a very interesting article last week with the title, Coronavirus Lockdown Sparks Boom in Online Learning for Adults Too. The business of selling skills online from art to coding has been booming during the pandemic. Online educators say adults are making time to learn during the lockdown, joining millions of children and college-going students that are taking classes at home. It is timely and therefore not a coincidence that we are hosting this virtual roundtable today on Nex-Gen learning for exponential times. On behalf of ETHRWorld Edcast and my fellow panelists, I would like to welcome you all. Today we will structure our discussion in three parts: reset, reboot, and renew. Reset, how are organizations really coping with the pandemic and what specific changes they are taking within L&D. Reboot, how are they leveraging technology in this journey of transformation. And renew, what are organizations really doing to create learning experiences that are engaging. And speaking of engagement, we have embedded a few polls during this discussion. So be sure to cast your vote. I will also be sharing a few key findings from our EdCast Learning Health Index Study 2020, which will help uncover a few truths, perhaps a few bitter truths. To warm us up, let's do a rapid fire on the topic itself. What does the topic Nex-Gen learning for exponential times signify to you? We're going to go in the order of Vishpala, Prince, Guy, Vinay, Avinash. Vishpala, over to you.
Thanks, Nishchay. I think for me, when I listen to here telling me the topic of Nex-Gen leadership in exponential times, for me, it's just a moment of change, right? I think we live in unprecedented times. And to bring it home, I think I would like to share an analogy. We all are iPhone and Apple product users, right? So when you go back to when the iPhone was launched in 2001, it was, the iPod was launched in 2001. Then we had the iPhone, which was launched in 2007. But little did we know in 2010, when the iPad came along, that It was something that it was a device that was on the go. It was really a shrunk tablet. So it kind of kept the user's needs right at the center. So I feel like we are in a similar moment with learning. I do think that there's a need basis the users for it to become simple, efficient, on the go, and really need-based. So to me, today's dialogue is all about that. The moment of change is here, and what do we do to make it relevant for the learner?
It's a moment of change. I wouldn't say, when you say next-gen learning, it's all about learning on the go. And if you look at the learning, I was just scanning the environment, right? Most of the learning actually happens more at an awareness level. Will it really dive deep to application and new age creation? So next-gen learning is all about building capacities that will drive innovation, that will drive growth, and that will help you to navigate the black swans that will come. Because if you look at the black swan, one was in 2008. Now we have got into, you'll have more black swans that will come in. So the next-gen learning is all about building adaptability, agility, and the cognitive co-creation to navigate the uncertainties and pave a path forward so that we don't remain locked down as we are today.
Nice. Let me come in. There are 4 words that come to mind when I think about next gen, and one's been taken up, which is change. I actually had the first one as being challenge. I think it's a challenge to us to respond, to modernize, and most importantly, and my team gets sick of me mentioning this word, but that's to accelerate. We just have to move faster to be able to match the pace and change in business, and to build, as Prince said, to build that agility as part of our capability to be able to meet what's coming head on.
I wouldn't call it probably exponential, but I think it's a quantum leap. What has happened in the last 3 months in an ideal time frame would have happened probably in 3 to 5 years' time. The urgency and the adaptability that has been shown by both learners and the ecosystem is unprecedented. We all know how we observe, learn, absorb, internalize, and apply various experiences in life determine our success at a human level. And that probably translates at a more professional and organizational level. So I think these are quantum leap times. The more exponential we grow, the more faster we grow and adapt ourselves and show an urgency to devise new ways to learn and bring content closer to learner, I think will determine the success out of this pandemic.
All words of wisdom flowing through. Vinay.
So first of all, thank you for inviting me to be on this esteemed panel. The heading is Next-Gen Learning for Exponential Times. And it is the exponential times which has been going on in my head since the invite came in. There are 5 things which, 5 inferences which I take from there. I think one is a decisive shift from push-based learning to pull-based learning, which will definitely happen in my view, and that will make learning far more successful, and it will ensure that it does happen instead of the struggles that we go through. Second is, I think, a radical shift in cost structures. Look at this conference, for example. You would have normally booked a 5-star venue, you would have sent invites, you would have got 200 people to come in, you got 6 times the number today who virtually connected. So I think the cost structures are going to, in many cases, dramatically come down as we discover the power of digital. And that is the third thing. The whole debate between physical and digital, well, the jury has come in and digital is the way forward. I think that has sunk in globally. Number 4, I think one irreversible trend which has set in globally and will set in India also in a big way is work from home. And when that happens, there is a lot of action you can expect on this. Don't think big players like Google, Facebook, Microsoft will stay away from this opportunity. There will be a lot of tools, technology, productivity-oriented softwares, a lot of business opportunities here. And I think there's going to be a lot of play in this area to make this a successful transition, because the transition is inevitable. Lastly, I think from a learning professional's point of view, I don't think a better opportunity could have come. I think in my 32 years of working, I've seen really training, come up the value chain from being only preserve of good organizations which had some training, and we largely dealt with manufacturing in those days. So you had good manufacturing companies having strong functional trainings. But with the advent of service sector, the training in other aspects are pulled up big time, but not enough support at various levels, including the technology support, which was missing. And I think there's a huge opportunity waiting to be had for people in the learning space.
Okay, great transition into our first section. And you know what's coming to bear, that not only is learning the earning curve, but also the yearning curve. Everybody wants to learn today. And that gives us a good transition into our first section, which is L&D Reset. And this one's for you, Guy. You have a big portfolio, a big bank, run learning for the whole bank. What are the biggest observable changes that you've seen in learning and development post the pandemic?
Yeah, no, and thanks for opening up with me for the first question. So the first thing I'd want to say is I'm not sure the changes have been brought about by the pandemic, but I certainly think they've been accelerated. So I think there's been opportunities for us to do some of this shifting, but we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to actually do things that have been hard, hard to date. Not because of capability, I think more because of mindset, both our own and also stakeholders. If I look at the changes, clearly getting people accessing and consuming digital content, it's accelerated. We had more content consumed in the first 3 months this year than we did in all of 2019, and some of that was pre-pandemic. As luck would have it, as it would favour the fortunate or the well-planned, we did launch our experience platform just after lockdown, which has just been, a huge advantage for us. Not all the learns are digital though. So like most, I think, on this call, we have a lot of frontline programs, we have credit programs, and they have had a large amount of face-to-face in it. And that's been difficult to shift. It's changed now. Yeah, the businesses are coming to us to say, we need our learning to continue. Please, can you enable it outside, of a venue? And so we've put a huge amount of work into that so that we can continue with the learning and help the businesses and individuals. I'm convinced that we won't go back to the way we were. This is permanent change, and I think. When I first got wind of what was going on in Hong Kong and China in early January, and I remember meeting with my team, and it felt like a sprint at that stage. So we've got to rapidly change things for a 3 or 4 month period to be able to get through it. And it was about 4 weeks into it, we looked at one another and said, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. This is going to be permanent change. And in fact, my biggest fear at that time was missing the window to be able to shift things, change habits, so we do come out, of a very big normal. One thing, somebody asked me about budgets. What's happening with budgets? It's really interesting. Of course, there is scrutinization of budgets, as there should be. I've seen in our organisation quite a difference, more from CEO, management team, sponsorship of the work that we're doing around learning culture, about learning habits. We are investing in future skills academies, and the management team has sponsored those. So the pandemic itself has accelerated, in my view, what we needed to do. It's created more attention. And actually with that has come some quite fortunate, I think, and timely sponsorship. I think I'd finish just by reiterating this opportunity we have now, and not to let it pass, to change things so that it becomes a new normal when we come out of the end of it, which we will. I had a call with some of our people in China today, and 80% of them are back in the office, or back 3 days and off 2 days. So we will come through this, and we just want to come through it with that new normal, without the need for the 5-star hotels all the time, with the ability to get 1,000 to 12,000 people on a call with minimal logistics.
It's good to hear. I mean, for one, I guess there's greater sponsorship from the executives within the organization. There has perhaps greater scrutiny for the budgets that are available for learning and development. But that gets me to the point, and to Abhilash, to you, that clearly there are choices to be made. And I guess priorities can be several. What are the few priorities that CEOs and organizations have committed themselves to, in your opinion?
If you observe the last 2 decades, the business cycles are getting shorter. The business models are changing so rapidly. The longevity of employees in organizations is also getting shorter and shorter with opportunities coming in. Organizations are getting flatter, more distributed. Technology is embedding itself into every realm. And CXOs are facing a unique challenge between the two ROIs. One is return on investment on learning. The other ROI is return on intention on learning. What is the intention and what investment are you trying to make? And that's a curious question that goes with CXO's mind is, do I put into business right now, or do I put into a future forward-looking VUCA world kind of intervention right away? And some of the must-win battles for CXOs today are, I can simply say, in addition to ROI, is retention of employees. Number one, how do you retain and attract the best talent? How do you ensure that organization is a continuously learning organization, which ensures that employees keep learning as they grow in the organization? The second is adaptability. As the world is changing very, very fast, how nimble-footed or agile is the workforce that can move between functions, geographies, and roles? Because as organizations get flatter, hierarchies are moving out. So how do employees move between various roles in the lifelong journey in an organization? I think third is the mobility. And this last 3 months have shown us what mobility can be with technology coming into play, which was unheard of, probably unthinkable or kind of a taboo 3 months back, even for larger organizations. And today they say everybody can work from home in next 6 months to 1 year.
So, the one thing I'd want to pick up, and I have a reputation of being a provocative moderator. So keeping with that reputation, I just don't want to gloss over the aspect of budget cuts. You've often heard about learning is the first budgetary item that gets slashed during a recessionary period. Have you seen that, observed that in your discussions with management teams and other organizations?
So I wouldn't say it is as it happened in the last global crisis in 2007, 2008, 2009. But I think currently the organizations have learned from it. I think organizations find that the budget could be redistributed, and it necessarily doesn't have to be an executive education or a management development program. Learning could be in the work of flow also the flow of work. You embed learning as an experiential part of the learning journey. You may have internal experts coming and helping as brand ambassadors or champions for the subjects that you would want to, inculcate as a learning in the organization. Your own supervisors or team leaders can become subject matter experts at a point in time. So it is revisiting the entire model. It may not be the typical analog world of a classroom interaction, but in the flow of work, you embed self-experiential learning, self-paced learning, informal learning coming into play, bringing in curated content, embedding it into your own organizational context. So it's bringing, we often say content is king and context is kingdom. So trying to keep using the same content in various contexts. And I give an example, people get bored with this, is that when you watch a movie on a cinema hall on the weekend, you are actually going out to entertain yourself. But the same movie that you download from Netflix onto your device on a plane is basically to kill time. So the content is same, but behaves differently in different contexts. So I think the organizations today are becoming smarter. They're using the same available resources in terms of reshaping it, redistributing, and trying to align as the world is becoming much, much dynamic in the coming times.
Ambitions are tall. Clearly, I think we haven't lost the optimism and the positivity and the tall ambitions and goals that we had. Perhaps they even increased and they're taller. But clearly, how do you rate our preparedness in terms of what are the gaps in the learning ecosystem compared with this tall ambition that organizations have put forth? Where are the gaps today?
So, if I take a play field, like I take it as an arena and I've got the players, right? So in the play field, you've got the learner at the center. Now, the biggest problem is the learner himself is a problem because he does not know what to learn. The demands on him are multifarious, right? And he was never really prepared for the change that the world is undergoing on a constant basis. Therefore, biggest gap is how do learners really prepare themselves and how do they really know what to really look for. That's one part of this, is the center. Now, adding to the confusion, right, are the other players around it. So who are the other players around it? So you've got the organization and this manager, right? They actually are dominant players, then you have got universities, colleges, and so-called knowledge hubs, then you have got technology playing field, because that's absolutely essential if you want to make the ecosystem really work, right? And then you have got what I would call it is facilitators. You have got a lot of people who will come, who will package it well, and they will really teach you how to really get confused. The poor learner will really not know what to really do, right? Now, if you take all these things through, then you have got content providers. There are a host of content providers, and they are there to show that their package is the best, and you do not know at what stage of learning it is, and what form of learning style is it really geared to, right? So this is the whole thing. Therefore, you don't have an integrated ecosystem that will really work. So Nishay, when you came and did your presentation on Edcast, it gave me some insight. I said, you all are trying to create an ecosystem which really does not exist, right? So that's an attempt that you all are making. It's a wonderful attempt that you are really doing, right? Now, how do you really make this ecosystem work, and how can all the players really understand the needs of the learner, right? And therefore create a proper segmentation. If you look at the learner segmentation, the learning segmentation, the value proposition of each learning, so that the poor learner is really not confused. He is able to really dive deep and get things what he or she really wants. Because learning has to result in transformation. Learning has to result in capability. And both transformation and capability should result in business disruption. Now, if all these three things don't really happen, the question would come, is this ecosystem really working? Therefore, how do we really make it work? And how do we fill the gaps in this ecosystem is a big challenge.
So what you're describing is also a journey from confusion to clarity. I guess we're all on that path today. And equally so, that learning itself is a whole system, and different parts must interact with one another, just like any machine does.
Yes.
To produce the desired result and output. And in this case, learning tied to results, essentially meaning that learning should either impact change in behavior or change in performance. Ideally, that's the reason for its existence. Now, interestingly enough, we had carried out this comprehensive research on learning health of organizations, looking at learning health through a system lens, through a system approach. And we found that in 104 organizations that we handpicked in India, the overall health score was 67. And tools and technology came out to be the weakest link in that set of units that interact with one another with a score of 50. Every dark cloud has a silver lining. I think what's come to bear is L&D has a very important role. It is recognized to be an important function and role, especially in these times. But equally, we've seen that the role of L&D has changed very rapidly in terms of its expectations. We found that in our Learning Health Index study, close to 50% of organizations, in fact, said that learning and development was not prepared and adept to meet the growing demands being placed on them by organizations today. With that, let me come to Vishpala. So this is the era for the rise of the CLO. And really, it's a superb opportunity in many ways for the CLO to take center stage and do the magic that's required that we're all expecting. What is it that the CLO must focus on in terms of new skills that he or she must acquire for this journey to be a fruitful one?
So I think, Nishad, this is my view. Again, I'm talking more as HR as a function before I come into probably learning. But I think HR as a function is also changing, right? Over the last couple of years, I think that every HR function is right in the forefront of change and transformation. So we are change evangelists. And I would think so as a representative
Just for the benefit of this conversation, let's give learning the front position.
Yes, but I may probably choose to take a slightly different path. I think for me, I don't think, I mean, learning is super critical, but I would think talent is the overarching sort of umbrella, right? So I would think that whether you have a CLO or whether you have a chief talent officer, but in the end, you need a position that's looking at talent holistically. Because I think what we've seen as a function is we have to move away from just isolated development or skill capability or probably what training and development functions we're focusing on. Because when you take an integrated view, then it becomes much broader, right? It's about what's the experience for an employee who's coming, who's getting onboarded, right? What is probably the mindset of the employees that are working with you, which has a deeper linkage to probably culture? What about succession planning? So I think like the first and foremost is that how do we think with this bigger picture in view? I think the second piece is that even when you look at needs analysis, because I know in the past, like years ago, I'm not talking about now, is where we would focus probably more microscopic. Okay, go to a leader. What is the skill set, or what is that capability, or what is that competency? Probably instead of starting that way, like what is it? And I think we've heard some of our panelists talk about it. How do you position the company for success, right? It starts from there, and then you kind of drill downwards to say, what are the capabilities? What is the mindset? What is the culture? And what is that ecosystem that we have to build? So I think net, I'm saying that L&D cannot be viewed in isolation, and I would encourage like every single professional to look beyond that. I think that the second big thing specifically for the CLO or the chief talent officer, we know while I think we engage very closely with the CEO or the CHRO, I think like just the engagement with, I would say, the CIO, right? And I think I've had the benefit of seeing that in a company like Uber, where the process or the deployment of technology is not an afterthought, right? So as you're building process, how do you integrate that? Do you have like dedicated engineers within the company who are focused on actually deploying technology for any solution that you would like to roll out? So I think that would probably be my view. Take the bigger picture and have it more integrated with talent, and probably work very closely with tech and engineering.
So again, reinforcing the view of looking at learning as a whole. And interestingly, it comes from the origin, the English word HAL, which means again whole, right?
Yes.
So clearly whole and hearty, and that's what we want learning to become, and fulfilling for every single individual within the organization. Time for our poll. So let's have our first poll up. Get ready, faster finger first, and please cast your vote. So can we have the poll question, please? Okay, very interesting. So often enough, you kind of put questions in either looking for confirmation or finding new information. And interestingly, this is a question that I was seeking confirmation on, because we found that 83% of employees around the world, in fact, are willing to take the responsibility to upskill themselves. And here again, you see a strong percentage of agree and strongly agree. If you combine the two, that's 68% of the voters believe that they are willing to take responsibility. So the message really is, if you create a conducive learning environment and ecosystem, then all you need to do is get out of the way and let the learner learn. With that, let's transition to our second section, which is about reboot. And reboot is about taking technology and making it an ally, and leveraging business applications, tools, systems that are available to you to accelerate learning, to scale it with speed. And interestingly enough, we found that in 75% of the organizations, we found that they're yet to make technology an ally in this journey of transformation, which is a very compelling finding. With that, let me start with Guy. Again, starting with you. In your opinion, what concrete steps should be taken by organizations in order to make technology an ally in this journey of transformation? How can we benefit from using technology?
Yeah, I'm going to borrow from some research from by Deloitte on high impact learning organizations, which I think correlates to learning culture and the health of organizations. And specifically around technology, there were four things that I actually recall and went back to. And one of them was that high impact learning organizations spend a higher proportion of their learning budgets on technology. Yeah, fact. And in fact, it was a big wake up for us when we did some benchmarking a couple of years ago. And was a catalyst for us actually getting more investment in for technology. I think the second was that high impact learning organizations default to existing technologies where they can, and they augment with learning technologies. And I think the other is consistent with getting more into the flow of work. They look at streamlining the work, the learning, and the tech, which I think is important. If I think of the goals, we need to get people comfortable with technology. Yeah, at a very basic level. Yeah, it's strange really, because in a home environment, we'll pick up a phone, a tablet, whatever it might be. Although I do get one of my kids to, sort out any problems I have. And yet when we go to work, all of a sudden we take on this different persona for many of us. So I think there's at the foundation level, getting people comfortable. We need the technology to support people so they can do their job better, so they increase productivity, and so they build capability. And I think at the last level, I think technology should almost be invisible. Yeah, so people are using it to do those things without, hardly even noticing it. I reflected on this question, that you posed to me, before the session, and looked at what we've done over the last few years to try and tackle those. And the first was we did a bit of experimentation a couple of years ago with an app. We built a pretty low cost app. It was to build network skills across our 60 markets. We have people in some markets selling to their clients services in other markets. So how do we get that knowledge? So we built a quiz, a small app. We put it out to about, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 people from memory. We had about a 50% take up. A lot of fun, 500,000 miles points, for the winner, leaderboards. It was an experiment, yeah. We had a lot of feedback. We didn't run it again, but we learned from that. So it got people familiar. The second thing is, in some physical classes that we've run, we've brought technology and simulations in to get people comfortable. And then we've taken them out into a different environment, whether it be virtual or in between virtual sessions. So again, there's a way of getting people, comfortable and using it in a, you haven't taken them right out of what they used to do to something very different. To me, probably the biggest thing, though, is being clear about the roadmap that you have and taking steps to get there. And if I look at our content strategy, for instance, if I went back 4 or 5 years, we built internal content and we had one external provider. We've increased that piece by piece. We then deliberately reviewed it. We used to send people into, to different portals to access this outside the organization. And of course, having the roadmap meant we always wanted to umbrella it under an experience platform, which we've now done. So not only are people able to access, internal content, they're also able to access our licensed content in a really seamless way. And of course, open source content. The opportunity in my mind is using the data. So the data we get now, what are people searching for? What are they consuming? Yeah. And that enables us to respond much better than we were ever able to. Yeah, I listened to the words earlier about, the old needs analysis and, focusing on, really, really small things. We can use that data in a much more powerful way now. If I reflect on where we've come from, they're kind of the steps we've taken. And we can't compare ourselves now to where we were, 3 years ago. I suspect in 3 years' time, we'll look back and we'll be having that, similar conversation, because it's going to move forward even further.
Perhaps that's the world of exponential technology, galloping, and it's changing every day. But we really have Burson by Deloitte to thank for you then taking Edcast on as your learning experience platform. So
yeah.
But Terry, when I've had these conversations with CLOs and around the world, in fact, there are a few things that kind of stand out, right? They're all looking for an agile, digital, scalable, experience-based platform powered by analytics, powered by AI. And ultimately, it seems simple enough, but there's a lot of complexity in how you make choices about the right tech stack. So let me go to Abhilash. Especially, what we've seen is obviously a surge in adoption of digital learning tools and remote working tools during the pandemic. But equally important, while this rush to go and get something because there is a need, there is equally an opportunity to reflect and think what your ideal tech stack ought to look like. What's your advice here?
It's a very interesting question, Nishay. And when Prince mentioned that in the middle of the field or the arena is the learner, I think the concept of treating learner as consumer is the starting point. And every consumer wants to have a choice. And when we talk about typical standard learning systems, we call them the LMSs, learning management systems. The word itself said it's management. Nobody likes to be managed. Everybody wants to have an experience of their own or their own. So comes the field of learning experience platform. How do you make it experiential for the learner on demand, on the go, as they like it? So I think the insurgence, I would say, of direct to device tools today is something which is catching up. You are leaving your office in the evening, you have 1 hour drive home, you have a chauffeur who's driving your car, you are sitting and watching a movie. And if that system knows and the analytical tools know that this is the time when you're out of office, and it puts across a 5-minute, 10-minute learning nugget to you, you absorb that. So engines which are capable of bringing all the information together, make it discoverable and searchable, help curate it into a meaningful journey, individualize to a learner's preference. I think these are the tools that are taking precedence today. And the good thing is that with AI and machine learning coming through, the only question lies is machines are learning. Are you learning? So the intelligence or the operating system or technology is just an enabler. It's just a tool. It's just an underlying software. But what are you deriving out of it is the important question. You may have a book on quantum physics or rocket science, but are you building a rocket out of it? What are you doing it for? So outcome-based learning, is there a system or technology, and which this I'm sure some organizations are questioning it. Should learning be a strategic intervention, continuous lifelong learning, active learning, engaged learning? Should it be directly embedded into bringing content and learners together? And that's where technology plays a role, is that if I can embed learning journeys or my learning abilities into my KRAs as an employee, it could be a standard operating system for me. Not that at the end of the year, the question is asked, what are your learning goals? Learning goals cannot be at the end of the year. Learning goals are continuous if you're looking at a continuous learning organization.
It's interesting that the choice of words that we have today in our narrative, and 5 years ago, would this be something that was unthinkable? And technology today has made all of this a possibility. But having said that, is it still easier said than done, Vinay? And what are the challenges? I mean, if it's an obvious must-have, and there is a set of criteria as described by Abhilash, why are organizations still hesitant to make that choice and jump onto the bandwagon? What are the challenges? Is it money? Is it the inability to understand how these technologies will come together? Is it our own preparedness? What are the challenges?
I think there are 3-4 things involved. I think if to your original point about budget cuts, which you asked to some panelists, if learning budget is being cut, the business leader who's benefiting from that learning, because of which his team's performance is going up, should be the person defending you, not the L&D head and the HR head. So if your budgets are going cut, then it's a wake-up call for you to first ask yourself the question, what value are you creating? So it's the same question which applies to the question that you just asked also. In my mind, I think, and it's to do with evolution of learning. It's a journey. Not everything is available at the same time. There are a lot of tailwinds, there are a lot of headwinds, all combined, and fortunately, COVID can very well turn out to be a very big tailwind. I think an integrated approach to learning, most organizations have a 70-20-10 framework for capability development. 70% all acknowledge is the on-the-job learning that takes place. But yet, if you really look at organizations, what support do they provide in that space? That's very minimal. That's left to the manager, the team, the peers. It's all informal learning that takes. So from technological standpoint, I think what I'm personally excited about is, like you have software as a service. I think learning as a service is also whose time has come. A learning marketplace. After all, you have to ask yourself the question that how much content can really be developed in this world. You don't need content builders inside your organization. Now, can the fellow stand up, your L&D person, and no disrespect intended to any L&D person on this panel and for our participants here. But what are you up against? You're up against a program delivered by a Harvard professor or a Michigan University professor. And where's the comparison? So what is it that you expect to do for yourself is a good question for learning professionals to ask themselves. Now, there are three things that everyone agrees on, that if you need a learning architecture for today's times and for future, it has to be on the go, it has to be bite-sized, and lastly, it has to be in the flow of work. Okay, now this is the most important part, in the flow of work. When I'm working, when I'm on the job, when I'm trying to do something, I need some help. Now, what is the kind of thing I'm looking for? I'm looking for policy-related information. I'm looking for process-related information. I'm looking for product-related information. I'm looking for my own competence or something which can help me deliver my job successfully. That is a link.
Sorry to stop you there. I'm going to use that as a cue to transition to my next question, which is actually learning in the flow of work.
Sure.
And Josh, in fact, coined this and made this popular. But the question is it real? I mean, how is it becoming a reality in organizations today? Because learning in the flow of work, which is really meant to be the 70,
right,
100, was something that was overlooked or assumed to have gotten done by the CLO within the organization. Wherein now, actually, you can control it. And the way I like to describe learning is really setting up a knowledge system on a knowledge network and exchange within the organization, and to be able to guide and direct and control the knowledge flows as they move from point A to point B, but measured and with design, right? Not unintended, but intended knowledge flows.
Absolutely.
Vishpala, learning in the flow of work.
Yeah, so I think just building on Vinay's point, like he spoke to us a little bit about what learning on the flow is and the need for it to be bite-sized and experiential. But I think, Nisha, to your point on how do you make it come alive, right? And again, to everyone on the webinar, think of days where you're working on something and will you really take out the time and say, okay, let me go data mine my LMS. There must be this amazing reference. The easiest thing you do is you just go Google, right? Like Google's kind of solved us, literally throws up thousands and thousands of links. So a little bit like learning on the go is that, again, to Vinay's point, are we competing with this external search world? I don't think so. But how do you probably integrate that and make that to probably your benefit? But talking on the 70%, Nishchay, like to say that what are some of the things you could do? I think going back to my earlier point on an integrated view of talent, like one of the things that I have seen more in the tech industry is that where for experiential based learning, like project based work, right? Or work that's over and beyond your work. How do you do that using technology? Because it's very easy to say, okay, chalo, I'll give you this project. But how do you do that more systematically? Where can you have an internal system where you're posting these, not roles, not permanent, where then again, employees have the option to say, hey, that's a skill I want, or maybe I want to probably use 30% of my time. So again, how do you use technology to give them that experience is probably one way of saying, okay, the 70% coming live. The second thing I want to talk about is, and I was looking at the chat on this particular webinar, someone spoke about the role of the manager, right? I don't think we've spoken about that at all in today's dialogue, but I do think that the role of the manager or the role of your peer, they do have a role to play in this ecosystem of experiential learning. So again, as organizations, as learning functions, how do you tap into that ecosystem? Because if you expect that everything is going to be done by that couple of L&D people, I don't think that's right. So it goes back to that broader piece of how do you enable learning to be more informal, where it can be within the team, it can be manager to employee, it can be through sort of digital systems. So I think more that we need to do. I don't think we've scratched the surface there, but I think we all need to be more innovative to tap into that 70%, because we can absolutely do more.
Yeah, and one tip before we go to the next question. One, of course, there's been a surge in collaboration tools within organizations. And if you can actually embed learning in these collaboration tools, such as Teams, where learning is made available at the point of need, right? Ultimately, the person wants to learn to perform and be able to carry out his or her responsibilities. And that's the best, because it's a tool used every single day to carry out your work. Then you can make learning part and parcel and embed it in that system of productivity, thereby unleashing that potential and driving higher capability building. My final question, and I still want to stick with the phenomena of budget cuts, since Vinay brought it up again, and go to Prince. A large part of a company's spend in learning and development has been on content, buying content, right? These libraries and purchasing content, which is premium content. How can you, or what are organizations doing to optimize that spend in terms of content spend?
See, learning is a choice. It's like running a business. So you must know, like, if organization is investing X into products, they require a return and there is a value proposition. So similarly, the content that you get is a product or service that you are providing for the organization. And the value proposition should be to ensure that people are able to realize their potential. So how do you really make it happen? Right? So you don't have to buy content to a very large extent, like in Mahindra Leadership University, we crowdsource content. So when Vinay says 70%, right? I'm not getting exactly 70%. It may be 60%, it may be 50%, it may be 80%. It does not matter. The reflection is when you look at learning styles, like you take active experimentation is one form of learning style. Concrete experience is another form of learning style. Reflective observation is another form of learning style. If you look at all these three, it looks at what have been the experiences of people. Therefore, can you use technology like augmented reality, etc., to bring that in place? So we do that for our salespeople. We actually bring the product into their laptops, into their faces, so that they are able to really connect with the customers in a much better this thing. Because if you look at it, we must segment the whole organization. You really derive your value with the front end, right? Then you have got the middle and then you have got the top. So you've got to see what sort of content and how will you strategically connect it, right? So therefore, content segmentation and content mapping, right, and content reach is absolutely essential. Therefore, learning managers are actually business managers. They are business managers because they transform minds of people, they transform people in the organization, and they build capacity beyond reality, which organization has really thought of. So you've got to get, like if you've got an excellent salesperson, use his experience, get him to curate a content, and then get it reached out to all your masses of people. We are a product organization. Our capability comes in terms of design, right? So how do we may be a 5th or 6th generation design company which is there. At each stage, I have got a learning. So how do I convert this tacit knowledge into coded knowledge? And this translation, because if you look at it, this requires a lot of effort. I ran an initiative in our company called Auto Passion, right? I actually curated content, 80% of which from our own people, right? And created a virtual platform. We reached it out to people, right? And then the interest is generated, because when they see a successful leader, a successful salesperson, a successful manager, he puts his whole content in the form of a story, right? Biggest thing is that you've got to make content in the form of a story.
I'm going to intervene just looking at, we have a 10-minute...
That's one point. Therefore, content has to be made interesting, content has to be made appealing, and content has to be marketed well. And therefore, it's not a huge cost. And which is costly content, you go buy it.
Right. So it's really a combination of open source, free content, codifying tacit knowledge, making it explicit, buying premium content, being cognizant of its context and its application, because clearly content is important, but context is even more important in the way
Yes.
it is utilized
Very
in
nicely.
the organization. Let's have the poll question, please. And then we've got 8 minutes for our third section. Okay, seems like we have a large number of people who believe that the lack of support from leaders and managers is the one big obstacle for employees to learn. I guess my observation of that would be that people are coming in their way. Otherwise, a self-actualized learner will always find a way to learn. And here we are creating hurdles. And perhaps we're giving too much importance to the role of the leader and the manager in our own journey of learning as individuals. Interestingly, time is not a big consideration, neither is money. And the policies, by and large, aren't a big deterrent as far as learning is concerned. Okay, so let's move to section 3, and this is going to be a quicker one, just given the paucity of time. We move to renew, and renew is all about design learning experiences that are engaging and are fun and are memorable and are personalized. And we come to the subject of learning experience design. Vishpala, why does learning experience design matter, and how do we make this count in organizations?
Yeah, I think firstly, I'm not an expert at learning experience design, but for most of you, you would know that it's probably based on user experience design. I think as a layman, right, just as a consumer, I think Avinash said that very well, that you have to look at the learner as your core or your customer. And in today's age and day where we've all accepted like everything we do is digital, right? So we order milk online, we order groceries online, we shop online. So if we're learning online, right? So I think it's about, again, it goes back to that, how simple it is for the learner and how are we keeping their needs in the center of it. So for example, if you work for an app, right, you always will probably measure the number of clicks that you get to probably the responsible page, right? And that's something that every company will say, how do you make it simpler? Can you get a person to get there in 2 clicks versus 3 clicks? So it's a little bit like that to say that for learning to be meaningful, right? Today, I don't think we can judge to say if someone wants to watch a video and learn versus someone wants to read a document and learn versus somebody wants to follow a blogger. I don't think we can choose anyone and say, hey, this is better versus that is better. So again, it's about user choice. So you have to probably give them the flexibility to choose what they want to do and how they want to consume. And I think that is the principle of just learning experience design. And that's key to anything that we design internally in the company.
Yeah, so a big part is convenience. A big part is personalization. A big part is ease of use, right? And personalization is one that I think has been spoken about donkey's years, right from when there was an understanding of learning styles and how people learned, right? Kinesthetic learners, audio-visual learners. But having that knowledge in organizations, and is that itself a big ask, Guy? And is personalization a tall ask in organizations?
I'm not sure it is, actually. I'm not convinced it is. I just think we need to get smarter about it. In the same way as just going back on the 10, 20, 70 year and what came out about support from managers. We've got to get smarter about that in L&D and spending more time with people leaders so we can get more done, on the job in that 70%. Coming to personalization, let me give you an example. Yeah, I'll try and make it brief. We've got a lot of business functions in the organization, and they're all very, how might I say it politely, they're special people. Yeah, they're all unique. Yeah. Having done some work in a number of those areas over a number of years, when you go and dig underneath it, actually the needs are largely the same. And what we've done is to package up from a common base, a common base of learning assets in a kind of a formula that will be unique to that particular person or that particular area. They see they're unique. It's a bit like an investment portfolio. Yeah, guy which has a certain risk profile, wants growth versus income, and what gets put together for me is all from the same base. Yeah, so we just need to get smarter about that.
But do we know our employees well enough? I mean,
so
enough time understanding their motivations, fears.
Yeah, I think we've been a bit, potentially we've been blunt with that. And so we can get better. So I'm going to say, and what we've done in the past, it's probably not fancy, it's not sophisticated, but it can be personalized. But with the technology now and what we can learn about individuals, yeah, who's Niche, who's Guy, what are their roles, what are they like? The ability to personalize now is so much greater. I don't think it's the problem that it used to be, but we need to get we need to get smarter about it. Those functional groups are a great example. Yeah, they all think that they've got. Gee, and I hope none of them are on the call. They all think they're getting what's exactly unique to them, which it is, but it comes from the from the same base. The technology is differentiating now. That's the difference, because we can understand much more about individuals and about groups to be able to respond.
Vinay, what policy changes do we need to bring about to democratize learning? If you wanted to really make learning this sea of wisdom available to everyone, what are the policy changes that we must enact?
See, I think it has to leverage the self-interest which everyone has for one's own growth of career. So if I know that if I do something, it will help me grow in my career, then there will be automatic, propensity to pick up that. And that in a larger system, in an organization, has to do with having a digital landscape where all roles are visible to you. What does it take to reach a particular role? What are the proficiencies? What are the competencies that you require? Which means that you must have a performance system which not only measures numbers, but also assesses you on competencies. Your own proficiency levels and competencies, strengths are known to you, gaps are known to you, and in the digital landscape of roles which are there in the whole organization, you can chart your own career. And to chart that own career, you have a powerful learning framework which you can leverage to get certified and to move ahead. So if you make this whole thing a transparent and self-driven journey, you will have a far better chance of success.
Put the learner in the driver's seat, and
absolutely,
the journey would be enjoyable, and perhaps the destination would be the right one. Okay, last 2 minutes, and therefore we're going to be quick on this one. Let's move to time. And interestingly, while this vote didn't show time was the biggest deterrent, we've learned that usually that's been used as the primary reason for why learners don't learn. How do you solve for this, Prince? How do you continue to motivate the learner to be vested in learning and development, where time is not seen to be a barrier?
See what happened, a lion will not hunt if it is not hungry. A horse will not drink water if it is not thirsty, right? So if learning does not invoke passion and energy in people, right, there is no way he will be motivated. So the ecosystem has to come to play to ensure that whatever learning the person has, it can be any form of learning. It can be learning through job, it can be learning through the coaching and mentoring or exposures, or through education. It has to invoke the passion and energy, and it has to become very Disney-like. When I said Disney-like, mean the characters should actually evoke interest. If they're able to do all these things, the person will be motivated. Right? Once he is motivated, he will be like a lion which will hunt, a horse that will drink, right? And a person who will actually consume nuggets of learning for his own growth and prosperity of the organization that he is working.
What's your favorite Disney character?
I like the Disney mouse,
Mickey Mouse.
Yes, Mickey Mouse.
Okay,
that's what
great.
built the brand.
Okay, so yeah, large ears, attentive listening as a competence. Finally, let's go to Avinash and close. This is the right time to enter learning and development as a profession. Any tips for those who are interested in pursuing a career in learning and development?
I think this is the best time, and as the name itself says, learning and development. So anybody who wants to pursue a profession in learning and development function has to have an innate curiosity for human behavior and should feel passionate towards changing those behaviors and help in the development of the individuals. Secondly, think strategically. I think anybody who has a strategic mindset will flourish very well in this function, because human capital feeds directly into the financial capital of the organization. So getting a grasp of the business as such and being a strategic player in the entire ecosystem is important. And third, and most importantly, have the ability to understand, interpret, and use data effectively. Because if you treat learners as consumers, there's going to be metadata around you, which you have to interpret and use effectively. I think these are my 3 tips for anybody in L&D function right now.
We're making CLOs super women and super men, right? Change maestro, data strategist, business optimizer, and marketeer, right? Or technocrat. And you can give more and more labels, but clearly this is a good time. With that, we come to our final poll. So can we have the poll question, please? And thank you everyone who's taken out the time today to invest their time with us. Great. You know what's interesting here? Obviously, money makes the world go around. So everybody wants to grow, and in their careers, and learning should be closely tied not only to your current job, to your future job as well. And Vinay referenced that as a learning framework tied to development. Are we giving too much importance on being recognized as a keen and active learner? And that's an interesting insight here, that not many people actually value that as we would have believed. The third, of course, anytime, anywhere, so you want to be in the driver's seat. With that, thank you on behalf of all the panelists, and back to Tarana.
Thank you, Nishay. Thank you all the panelists for an engrossing discussion today. Now we have moved to the end of this discussion, which indeed provided wonderful content and valuable takeaways for all the participants. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for being such an incredibly well-informed audience. Thanks to all esteemed panelists and speakers, and a special thanks to Edcast for bringing this discussion forward. Thank you.